Our next presenter is Jennifer Christie, and perhaps you already know Jennifer's story. It is going to be a very powerful one. She is the founder and executive director of Love Louder, a no exceptions let me say that again with emphasis, no exceptions, pro-life support system for women who have been victims of sexual assault. Jennifer made national headlines in 2014 when her story, Raped on a Business Trip, My Husband and I Chose Life, went mega viral with over 1 million direct shares to Facebook and reprints across the globe in dozens of languages. Since then, Jennifer has become active in the pro-life community as an international speaker, a member of Personhood Alliance, and a freelance writer for publications such as Focus on the Family and Live Action. Also, a nationally certified sign language interpreter, Jennifer has interpreted for Abby Johnson's Pro-Life Women's Conference and will be interpreting, in fact, did so for the virtual March for Life in Washington last month. She has been married almost 26 years. She has 5 kids, 2 grandkids, and 2 goofy dogs. Her memoir is scheduled to be published by Focus on the Family and Tyndale in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jennifer Christie.
Is this on already? Oh, it is. Okay. I wrote my biography once for a really fancy event that I was doing, and it said that, Jennifer once bought door-to-door encyclopedias and has a really bad Amazon addiction, and they did not think that was funny at all. So since then, I've kept it straight, but it's not nearly as enjoyable. So thank you. I was here 3 years ago, and Molly invited me sort of as a spur-of-the-moment thing. I was on her radio show, and I don't think she knew that I wasn't a speaker. She found out, but she didn't know then, and she invited me, and I was very, very green, but it was one of the best moments of my life. I came here and I spoke, and everyone was so wonderful and so welcoming, and so it's incredibly exciting to be back here. So I thank you all. It's wonderful to be back in a place that is no exceptions, and I'm going to be telling a story that's it's a little bit uncomfortable, and that's what I like to do. I like to make people a little bit uncomfortable, and maybe light a fire in your belly. I'm going to be talking about the story of my youngest son and my husband and I and our family and our journey over the last 6 years. And I'm going to start by showing a video and just kind of give you a little bit of what we've experienced and encountered over the last few years. So if you'll run the first video, please. Could you guys see those comments? Okay. Those were largely from pro-life groups, people who call themselves pro-life. Demon spawn, monster's child, rape seed, rape baby. 60% of people who identify as pro-life make exceptions in cases of, I used to make exceptions in cases of because it seemed compassionate, it seemed right. And then I became a statistic, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So I've been married, as mentioned, for 26 years, even though it doesn't seem possible because I look so young. Do you need some water? Okay, all right. Already. I have 4 beautiful, I said I wasn't gonna, I have 4 beautiful children and 1 with a really good personality. That's not true. I have 5 beautiful children. And this year my husband and I became a grandchild to 2. Again, 2 grandchildren this year. And 3 of my boys are here with us this week. I'm a sign language interpreter by trade. This is what I do. This is why I use a handheld mic, because I tend to move and I tend to use my hands. 7 years ago, I was on assignment. And I was traveling for work, as I am wont to do. And I took an assignment out of town. And the first 2 weeks I was traveling, and I was going back and forth out of town. And let me preface this, okay? If you've read in my bio, and yet you're still here, which is great, but sometimes people read in my bio what I'm going to be talking about, and I think they shy away a little bit because this is an uncomfortable conversation. No one really wants to talk about conceived in rape. No one really wants to talk about the exceptions. Is the bar open? Is there a movie playing? Anything but coming in here, because this is going to be a difficult conversation to have. So I want to assure you, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, that this is not going to be an unpleasant talk. This is not going to be a true crime tale. This is not going to be something where, you need to run out of here with your children or covering your ears or anything, I don't think. What I tell is essentially a love story. And it's a love story between a husband and a wife and a mother and a child and a loving God and his people. So, back to work. I'm working, I'm out of town. And I'm driving back and forth the first week, and I'm grumpy and exhausted, and my husband says, why don't you stay up there for the second week? And people are always like, oh, he was looking out for you, and I think he was looking out for himself a little bit, saying, well, just stay up there the second week. We'll get you a nice hotel room, you can have some time to yourself, and that's what I did. I stayed up there for the second week, and it snowed that last day. It snowed, and this does not Ohio snow, it North Carolina snowed. And North Carolina doesn't snow. Texas just had that big snowstorm and no one was expecting it and everyone was all that's sort of what it was like. We didn't get much, but everything shut down. Schools shut down, work shut down, everything kind of went, it's the apocalypse. And work let out early that day, and I'm a Jersey girl, and I remember driving back to the hotel, and it was calm and it was peaceful. And there was nothing about the beauty of that day that made me think that this is the day that's going to change the world. And I got back to the hotel, and I loaded up my arms with, I don't even know whatever was in my car. There's always a lot in my car. And I put my hood up, and I wrapped my scarf around my face, and I did everything they tell women traveling alone not to do. And I say this not to victim shame, but just we live in the kind of world where you have to be careful. And I wasn't careful. And I made my way up to my room, which opened to the outside of the parking lot, which is also not a great idea for women traveling alone. And I dumped everything on the floor, and I turned around to close the door, and there was a man in my doorway. And I say man, but in my mind I think kid, because he looked like a kid. He was young and clean-cut and tall, really freakishly tall. And I remember thinking in the storm, that maybe he needed help. Maybe his car broke down, he needed something. And I had a lot kind of flash through my mind in about 2 seconds, which is what I had before he punched me in the head. And we talk a lot in trauma. We talk a lot about the fight or flight. You have instincts, you fight or flight when things really happen. And we don't talk nearly enough about freeze. And I froze. And I froze because this is not something that happens in real life. This is not something that happens to me. This is the stuff of Lifetime movies and news. And when my delayed fight instinct did kick in, I fought. And I heard before I felt my ribs crack and my fingers break. And I remember trying very hard to disconnect from my body and crawl somewhere inside myself. And I said over and over, whatever is happening to my body, he can't touch my soul. I passed out at some point, and I remember waking up to the sound of screaming. And I opened my eyes, and I'm in the back of a stairwell outside that led to the dumpsters. And there's a woman leaning over me, crooning at me in Spanish, and she's crying, and her face is very kind. And she's trying to cover me with her coat, and that's when I realized I wasn't really wearing anything, and I remembered fighting, and that was all I really remembered right then. In the hospital, I would be treated for the broken bones and a brain bleed that resolved without surgery but left me with a seizure disorder. Internal damage. I'm scheduled to have my 11th surgery next month, just to fix what one man destroyed. In the aftermath of this attack, things were not great. Jeff and I had been married for 19 years at this point. We'd been through a lot. You think you've pretty much weathered what there is to weather, and you know how to handle most situations. And this was not one we really knew how to handle. We'd been Christians for a long time. We grew up together in the church, but we were not ready for this. Have you guys ever seen Beetlejuice? There's a scene in Beetlejuice where this couple is killed in a car accident, and they come back to their house and they don't realize they're dead, and they find this book called The Handbook for the Recently Deceased, and it kind of gives them like all these rules and all these instructions for how to live as dead people. Okay, that's kind of what we needed. We needed a sexual trauma book for dummies. We needed a how to live now. What do we do now? That was sort of the question, and we talked a lot about praying for each other, but we didn't pray together. It didn't feel right. We didn't know, Jeff was carrying all this guilt. I'm your protector. I stood before our family and friends and before God and vowed to protect you, and why wasn't I there? And I was like, I can't handle your guilt too. I've got all this trauma, and I don't need to see your sad, mopey face, around. It wasn't working, and he try to smile and tell me we're going to be okay and we're going to get through this. And I remember being so mad at him and saying, you liar, we're not going to get through this, because I could hear him crying and punching the walls and sobbing and throwing up in the shower and then coming out and smiling at me and saying, we're going to be okay and we're going to get through this. And I just knew that we weren't. About 6 weeks-ish after this attack, I was scheduled to go work again, scheduled to go on this cruise. And in sharing my story when it first came out, there was a lot of criticism about this. Oh, she was fine, she went on a cruise. I'm like, she didn't go on a cruise, like I was scheduled to work. And when we were talking about this, I didn't call the agency and tell them, this horrible thing happened, I can't do this. I didn't tell anybody. I couldn't face telling my mother, who had just left the state. I couldn't tell her over the phone, and we couldn't talk to Jeff's parents, because if they knew before my mother did, that would not be a good scene. And how do you tell people? We couldn't tell our children. We told them I'd been in a car accident. How could I look in the face of my daughter or my little boys and tell them something like this? I couldn't do it. So we got close to the time I was supposed to leave, and Jeff said, maybe you should go. You're not doing well here. You're jumping at shadows. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. You're in your mind all the time. He's taken enough from us. You love your work. We've got to figure out a way to live again, to go back into normal life. It's got to happen. So I packed a bag, and I went on this cruise. Not a good plan. But it sounded right. It sounds reasonable, right? You have to live again. You have to. So on day 2 of this 10-day excursion, I get really, really sick. And they figure it's dysentery, because that happens, I guess, a lot on cruises. Note to self. If you ever want to go on cruises, that's apparently a common thing, which should give you pause. But so I get quarantined, which back then was a thing. Now we're like, sure, but back then that was a thing. And I get sent into this medical unit. And I'd interpreted a handful of cruises in my life, but I was with a group who had done like hundreds. That's all they did, and they were old hands by this, and they didn't care for me. But if you've been on cruises, and it's a unique breed of people who do cruises, it's sort of all they do with their lives. It's true. The average age of the crew on cruises is like 15. People from all over the world sign up to do this, and they do it in like six-month kind of bouts. And they all sign up because they want an adventure. They all speak English mostly, but they're from all around the world. And they know enough to get by, and it's a party, whatever, a party on the ocean, and everything's international waters. You can do whatever you want, and that's sort of the theme for some of these. So I get to this medical unit, and again, young kids. And they are very adept at handing out Dramamine. And if you have a jellyfish sting, they are your people. They can take care of that. They were not prepared for me. So I get there, and they were giving me antibiotics, because that's what they can do. They can do this, have a pill. And I wasn't getting better. So after a day or so of this, they send in this little 12-year-old to take care of me. And she was like, we don't know why you're not getting better. I'm like, hey, me neither. She's like, we're going to give you something stronger. Do you think you could be pregnant? And I immediately start to say, well, no. We had 4 kids, and it was a really rough last pregnancy. We figured out the problem. My husband got it fixed. And sorry, I know that's not funny in Catholic crowds. But no, I can't be pregnant. But there was something about the way she said it that time kind of slowed down. And I got this knot in my stomach, and I said, you know what? I was raped about 6 weeks ago. You might want to give me a test. And she paused for a second, and to her credit, she kind of got herself back together, and she gave me a pregnancy test. And I see her in the corner shaking it. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Like if what's going on, what I think is going on, it doesn't shake away. But she hands it to me. And I said, there are 2 lines there. And she goes, maybe. And I was like, maybe. Like, it says on the box. I don't know where you got your license or your degree. Like, I'm not knocking the Ukraine. She was really sweet, but I don't know what their stringent requirements are for medical school, because that is definitely a positive. And at this point, I remember kind of folding in on myself and sort of rocking back and forth and just saying, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it wasn't even about, can I keep and love this child? It was, what am I going to tell people? Because there was now so much to tell. And Doogie was really distressed, and she looks at me and she says, you've been really sick, something could be wrong. We've got to take you to get an ultrasound. We're gonna make a stop tomorrow. We're gonna stop in Cartagena, Colombia, just where you want to be if something is wrong with you. Top-notch medical care. And we're gonna get an ultrasound. We're gonna see what's going on. So perfect. So I'm gonna wait to tell my husband till I know exactly what's going on. So less than 24 hours later, and my life is completely unrecognizable. And I'm in this hospital, sort of. They say it's a hospital. It looks like a basement. It's dark and it's crowded, and I'm surrounded by people. I don't know the language. I'm almost 40. I'm back in a gown, getting ready to have an ultrasound, and it's almost humorous because nothing is as it was. Nothing. And they pull over this ultrasound that had to have been the first one ever made. I swear, it was enormous, and it like creaks, and I'm thinking, they're not going to see anything on this. And they turn it on, and it kind of comes on like one of those old 70s TVs, like, and there's all this fuzz, and then it kind of clears out, and I see this little dot on the screen. I see this little P, and I have an interpreter there who starts to talk, and I just kind of put my hand up because I know what that P is. I've seen them before. And I'm waiting for the feelings. I'm a woman who was violently raped, and I know what I'm supposed to feel, right? When we hear about this all the time, I'm supposed to feel rage and disgust and horror and all these things, and I'm waiting. But I look at that P on the screen, and I smile. For the first time since the attack, I smile at him. And I smile because that dot, that P, that little flashing light is hope and life and light and joy. And something comes alive inside of me again. And I remember thinking so clearly, okay, I couldn't protect myself. I fought and I tried, but I couldn't. But that little P, that child, him I can protect. So I get back to the ship. And in my mind, anyway, everyone is whispering. Not the whole ship, not the thousands of people. No, the little medical unit, everyone is like whispering. And I don't know if that's true, but in my mind they are. And someone, I don't remember who, comes up to me and says, oh, you can use the captain's quarters or doctors, I don't remember, some lounge. You can call your husband. And we had been emailing back and forth because it's like $50,000 to call over international waters, and we didn't have that. So he knew I was sick, but I wasn't about to email him and, hey, guess what, Dad? I couldn't do that. So I called him, and he picked up immediately, and I just said, are you sitting down? Like, no preamble, let's just get to this. We've got to talk. I said, are you sitting down? I'm pregnant. And there was the slightest pause. And he said, okay. And I said, okay, what? And when we talk together, at some point, there are people who are like, aw. I'm like, don't encourage that. That's not an appropriate response. Okay gives me no information at all. So I was like, okay, what? And here I just explode. I'm like, okay, what? We haven't told the kids. We haven't told your parents and my mom and my dad. And he's just like, sweetheart, which is sort of our dynamic. I'm like, what? He's just like, He's like, sweetheart, this is a gift. This baby is something beautiful from something so terrible and painful for us. We love babies. And I said, yeah, we love babies. And he said, we can do this, you and me. This will be awesome. I said, okay. So for the rest of the week, I'm on suicide watch. And I stay in this little unit, and I'm kind of bombarded with, I believe, very well-intended doctors, nurses, custodians, anyone who really wants to talk to me, telling me, you do not want this. You do not want a child from rape. You will never be able to move on. You will never be able to forget. If you have this baby, who no one calls a baby because then it's real, if you continue with the pregnancy, you will always have this reminder hanging over your head. You will always have this reminder, as if you abort, then everything is forgotten. But I realized then that these are just some of the myriad of lies that they tell women at their most broken and their most vulnerable. Abort and you can move on. Abort and you can forget. If you keep the child, again, not called a child, you will never be able to forget. So I do get that question all the time. Is your son a reminder? Is your son a reminder? So one of my favorite things to say is yes. Yes, he absolutely is. My son is 6 now, and he is the most beautiful reminder of women rising above their circumstances. My son... It's true. Is a beautiful reminder of love overcoming hate, and that who we are as human beings is not determined by how we were conceived. At the end of this trip, I asked to speak to the nurses, the doctors, custodians, anyone who was there. I want to talk to everybody before I leave, and I just said, thank you. Thank you for being here, for talking to me, for helping me through this week. It could have been a lot harder. If you ever think about me again, if you ever wonder about the rest of the story, know that my husband and I had a beautiful baby in the fall of 2014. And there was silence, nothingness for a moment. And my one little Ukrainian doctor who can't read a pregnancy test, she had been pushing abortion hard all week. You can't do this, you don't want this, you could take a pill, it'll be over. She puts her hand on my arm and she looks at me for a really long time, doesn't say a word, but has tears in her eyes. And then she just walks away. And I thought, God did something there. Like I'll probably never know what, but something happened. There's power in this story. There was another doctor who just said, do you ever think you could be so strong? And I thought, I don't think of it as strength, really. I'm just a woman and I'm having a baby. And I think about that when we read so often on all these websites, all these pro-life blogs or whatever, the strength of women who are caring after rape, and we can't expect everyone to do that, but is it strength really, or is it the most natural thing in the world to have and love our babies? What would we do? What would the response be if women who conceived in rape weren't told that it was an extraordinary feat to love their child? How much of a struggle would it be for them if they weren't met with, wow, well, could you really do this? Could you really handle this? Would you be able to do this, to carry your child, rather than your child from the beginning, not the rapist child, not demon seed, not demon spawn, but your baby? How can we help you? How can we walk alongside you while you love and raise your baby? This is not something that I've shared publicly before, but I think it's important to. I started sharing my story early on. I didn't want to. I was very much traumatized, but there's a push in the pro-life movement when people see you talking a little bit about your story online. You're kind of grabbed at. Don't you want to share? Don't you want to share? You'll help other people. Don't you want to share? You don't always want to share. You're not always ready to share. But I started sharing. I shared just a small little blog, and it blew up. Millions of people all felt like the whole world was talking about me, and not favorably, not favorably at all. My husband and I were idiots. We were morons. We should be dead. Our child should be sacrificed. All of these things. And I started traveling and speaking, and it wasn't until a few years into it that I realized that not everyone finished a speaking gig and came back to the hotel and sobbed and had panic attacks and nightmares and barricaded themselves in their room and slept in a little ball curled up by the door, that wasn't the norm for most speakers, probably. I haven't taken a poll, but I'm going to guess. It wasn't the norm to gut yourself on the stage in front of thousands of people. I can tell my story now. I didn't know how to then. I didn't know how to without reliving it over and over. But I felt like that's what I needed to do because I was healed, because that's what I read. Your son healed you. I was told, what do I tell people? Tell people how your son healed you. And that's a lot to put on a kid. That's a lot to put on anybody. But that's what I was supposed to share. Your son healed you. Tell how your son healed you. So my son healed me. And that's what I said. I got up in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people. My son healed me. And I was in Malta in December of 2018. And I was staring out at the jetty, the water. And there were flashing lights. It was Christmas time. And I remember thinking, if I look at those lights and then go lay down in the jetty, I'd have a seizure and it'd all be over. And that's not something that I think. I'm a Christian. I'm a God-fearing woman. I have a family that I love. That was not right. And I remember reaching out to someone in the pro-life movement, and I said, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not okay. I just realized it. It took me a while to realize, but I'm not okay. And they said, you're not canceling speaking, are you? And I said, kind of, maybe, I don't know. And she said, if you do this, if you stop, if you get help, if people know that you aren't okay, everyone's going to think you don't love your son. So I kept going. You know, we think that we started wearing masks in 2020, but that's a lie. A lot of us have worn masks for a lot longer than that. So I kept standing up in front of crowds, and I kept telling people how my son healed me, and I kept going back to hotel rooms and barricading myself in there and sobbing, reliving everything over and over. February 2nd, I spoke at a beautiful event in New Jersey, lots of Catholic crowds, and they cheered for me, and they stood, and they hugged me, and they prayed for me, and I went back to my room, and I overdosed myself into a coma. And before the night was out, when I was still on a ventilator, everyone who told me what a hero I was, everyone who told me how badly my story was needed in the pro-life movement, had erased me from their pages, had erased me in my story, because I was no longer a hero, because I had broken, and I wasn't really useful to the pro-life movement anymore. When I woke up, and I had to learn to eat again, and speak, and walk, and write, I was told, no one can know about this. You will damage the whole pro-life movement, and everyone will think it's because you had a child from rape. And I thought that was pretty strange. I thought, why wouldn't people just think I was a human and I broke? I was a woman who was raped and tortured and I broke. No. And so I was quiet about it for a long time. And then on July 4th of last year, I decided I didn't want to be quiet about it anymore. And so I had my own little Independence Day, and I talked about it. And you wouldn't believe how many people came up with their own stories of despair and brokenness and pain. How many other people took off their masks while we were being mandated to put on a different kind of mask. And so maybe I would lose speaking events, or maybe I would lose followers, and that's okay, because I think it's really time to get real in the pro-life movement. If we are honest, if we are real about being real for life, if we are honest about being real for life, we need to be real for all life. And that is for the people behind the stories that we're so interested in, the stories that we're so eager to push and to sell. These people are not a commodity. So I can stand before you today and say that my son was absolutely healing, but he did not heal me. God healed me, as it should be. Thank you. What was missing in the pro-life movement, what we didn't find, the support when I was not okay. There's a lot of support when you're a hero and you're riding high and everyone wants a piece of you. There's a lot of support there. Not so much when you're at the bottom. So I made something for when you're at the bottom. I created Love Louder. And that name was something that became synonymous with my story when people first started saying, what are you going to tell your little boy when he's older? And we've told him a little bit now, age appropriate. We've told him how special he is. We've told him how his daddy chose him, how mommy was very hurt and the family was very sad and a bad man hurt mommy. But then something beautiful and wonderful came and the whole family was happy again and healed because of you, and we're all better people because of you, and he knows that much. We said that, we're going to tell him that at a time when we were in utter darkness and in pain, you came into this fractured family and you pieced us back together. And we're going to tell him that this is just a part of his story, but it doesn't define him. Who he is the fingerprint of God on his soul. Who he is the love that's poured into him. Who he is exactly who God designed him to be. He's not a piece of a man, a crime that happened in a state he doesn't live in a place he'll never travel to. We're going to tell him that when I was expecting, there were all these voices shouting at us saying that you do not deserve to be here, that you are a child from rape, that you should not be here. And those voices were loud, but we loved you louder. And that tagline, Love Louder, kind of became associated with our story. And we realized it doesn't just mean, it's not just for that instance and what we're going to tell our son. It applies to so much. It applies to how we should be loving our enemy, how we should be loving the people who lash back out at us and who come to my page and tell me that I should be dead, my son should be dead, all of that. It's speaking into that darkness. It's speaking truth. It's speaking a word of light and all of that. It's loving louder. And so we created Love Louder, which is a no exceptions support system for women who have been raped, who have been sexually assaulted. We encourage them to choose life, whether or not they're pregnant. We are going to be there for the women, whether or not they're pregnant, in their brokenness. And to let people know that it's okay not to be okay, to take off their masks. And that's incredibly important to me. And so that's what we started this year. And that's something, again, that God brought out of that brokenness. And I understand that this mammoth uphill battle that we are fighting can often feel like, the starfish on the beach, just one at a time. And it sometimes doesn't feel like we're making a difference. But even for that one at a time, even for that one, for me, for my boy, that one is making a difference. And so if I can encourage you to love louder, whatever that means to you, whatever your story is, it matters and it's important and it could make a difference to that one starfish. I do want to leave time for questioning, and I do want to leave time we have one more video, and which kind of is in response to the first one I showed you, is, all of that horrible stuff. Why do we keep going? Why do we continue? And then I'm going to share with you a spoken word poem. I don't know if you guys know who Amanda Gorman is. Amanda Gorman was the inaugural poet, the inauguration, imagine that. And she got all kinds of press for writing a pro-abortion poem that went viral. And it was it wasn't even creative, really. It was a bunch of talking word, pro-abortion rhetoric spewed into poetry. And I didn't think that needed to stand. So I wrote something in response to that. So I'm going to share that with you after the video, and then we'll have questions. So you want to roll the next video?
This is a rape survivor talking about, this is an amazing clip, talking about being pro-life.
There's no forgetting.
No woman is ever going to forget what happened to her. I've been told so many times that if you just had an abortion, you won't always have this reminder hanging over your head, this reminder. Is my son a reminder? He absolutely is. My son is a reminder every day that as women, we can rise above our circumstances. My son is a reminder that love is always stronger than hate, and that who we are as human beings is not determined by how we were conceived. A woman at her most broken needs hope and help and love and people rallying around her. She does not need violence on top of violence, tragedy on top of tragedy. I'm here tonight, one woman, but I speak for most of us when I say, stop calling my son a rapist child. Stop calling him evil seed and child of the devil. He is my son, and he has a right to be here. Do not use me and my rape and my story and the story of all of us mothers from rape who love our children as a banner to hide behind and excuse the genocide of the innocent. We love our children.
That is one of the most powerful statements I have heard from a mother.
People have asked me before, what is it like raising a rapist child? And that's the kind of comments that people put out there. This is someone else's baby. This is demon spawn. This is rapist baby. How do you deal with that every day? And my answer is that I don't know what it's like to raise a rapist child, because I'm raising our child.
Eight reasons to stand up today against abortion bans in the United States. That's how it starts. And all the people cheer. Or all, lest the 60 million voices will never hear. Well, I admire the rhyme, the incomparable sound. In the zeal, the appeal got a little turned around. So I proffer, to the supporter, to the scoffer. 8 reasons why we should stand up today for every human life on the planet. 1, there is no penalty for rape harsh enough that it will ever erase the scars, retrace the stars that shone on her shame that night, that morning, that afternoon, that moment. Not a penalty harsh enough exists for a woman once her soul has been stole. But saying it's all about control, aren't we collectively appalled when someone bigger and stronger forces their will onto the body of someone else? Or is that only when we don't call that action choice? Number 2, where is the empowerment in telling a woman that she can't? In fanning the fearful flames that burn the idea of motherhood at a stake of inconvenience? And well, what about all I dream? And here is where we intervene. Number 3, pregnancy is indeed a personal decision. No government, clergy, or activist group need apply. However, once that new life exists, that new life has individual value. Yes, the same worth that you have, that I do, and moving right on through to number 4. The idea that government will never rise up against legal immorality is a false narrative. Just because there will always be murder, just because there will always be rape, just because does not a just cause make. Number 5, Roe v. Wade was and is unconstitutional. Based on a lie, it spits on the 14th Amendment because personhood should never be determined by the size or location of a person. Number 6, what we are staring over is the precipice of the triumph of evil that has come upon us when after for far too long good men and women have done not nothing but not enough. Because until the most vulnerable among us are safe and sound in the safest place, we will sound a call to action in this and every place. Number 7, the rallying cry is for freedom, is for hands off our bodies, and that's feminism. But what is more beautifully, powerfully feminist than protecting our own children from a society, a world, a country that marginalizes and minimizes, diminishes and disguises their value and their light, their existence in this fight? And a nod to those 19th century women who paved this winding road with suffrage and with suffering, somehow so often conveniently aborted from the narrative as this. Those first feminists were pro-life. Numbers 8 through infinity are steps on a list. How this battle won't be won not by tongue nor by fist. It's courage and heart, it's walking the walk. And parcel and part, it's the grace in your talk. It's reaching a hand to a mother in need. To her child, her children, it's sowing a seed. And let's not what if about how one was conceived. The simple truth is, when it comes to determining the matter of life, it's not up to us to determine when another life matters. Thank you.
I don't know about anyone else, but that was the best rap song I've ever heard in my life. I haven't heard too many good ones. That one was phenomenal. I was so pleased that I didn't have to ask everyone to stand. We all leapt out of our seats. What an amazing, amazing story. Jennifer, there's only a handful of cards here, and we have some time for questions, which is good. I suspect that what you said at the very beginning and what you told us last night when you kind of teased your presentation, you make people feel uncomfortable. And I think there's a lot of people here who maybe have questions, but you're a little uncomfortable asking them. I don't think she would have told this story if she was uncomfortable receiving them. So while I ask the small number I have here, if you want to write cards and give them to our volunteers, bring them up. Don't be uncomfortable. I think she's made that very clear. She can handle it. The first question, Jennifer, is somebody wrote what I thought of, and I in fact whispered to Molly as you were ending your presentation. Person says, I hate to ask, but what about your rapist? Was
Sure.
he found, prosecuted?
That's actually, don't hate to ask, that's usually the number one question that comes up. We found out, it was years later, he went on to rape and murder a few other women before he was caught by the brother of one of his earliest victims and killed.
That's a part of the story I did not expect, a twist to the story. Dare I say justice. I know we are all pro-life here and right to life, but wow.
Yeah, it's a bit of an awkward kind
Yes,
of.
it is.
I said on a radio interview once, I was like, so we got justice, and they're like, we're going to need to edit that out, and I was like, okay.
Well, if I may jump in with a question of my own ahead of the cards, we talk about this on conservative radio shows like mine, Glenn Beck's and others all the time. People who say to us, if you're so pro-life, how are you pro-death penalty? And in a case like this, where your rapist eventually was killed, do we celebrate that? I heard a few woos out here. I don't know. How do you justify that?
It was
or
really,
reconcile that? I apologize. Not
No,
that you have to
it's
justify
okay. It was-
anything. How do you reconcile that?
when I found out he was killing other women, that was the most difficult thing for me, because then there's survivor's guilt is a very real thing. And at first I dealt with, what if I had been able to stop him? This man who was 6'5", 300 pounds, like what if I had been able to do something? And that was very difficult for me. And what became very evident after a year or 2, 3 years, he was not stopping. He was not stopping. He was destroying families. He was murdering people. And I don't have any hate in my heart, but he was stopped.
Amen. I agree. I apologize. I'm going to slide one more of my own in
Sure.
here. I was so grateful rather, to hear your husband's voice at the end of that.
Yeah.
Because as I sat here, and you talked about him throwing up in the shower and punching the walls and then trying to put a smile on it, that was in the aftermath of your victimization and his, to that degree. I was going to ask you, and you kind of gave a little bit at the end, when it was time to give birth, and when you were giving birth to a child that was not biologically his, how did he handle that?
He was a rock through the whole thing. We often speak together, and that's one of the things that he says. He's often asked, "What is it like to raise a rapist child?" And he's like, "I don't know. I'm raising our child," and it's never been. He's a very matter-of-fact kind of person, and it's just he's taken a lot of heat for that, answer of saying, "Well, just okay, you're pregnant," and really when he's asked to explain that, he just said, "My wife and I are one. She's pregnant. We're having a baby." Like there's really babies we knew, babies we understood, babies we loved. We were in this very uncomfortable place of not knowing what to do, but babies. Okay, we were back on level ground. We could do that, and that was really what got us through is anticipating this new life, and which was really, we both saw it as a gift and as ours. We'd been together for always. We were a unit. We were a team. We were one, and so this was something we were doing together, and it's never been anything else.
It is amazing. You were both very blessed to have each other. Okay, to the questions from the attendees. I have more, but this is your time. How can we best support our loved ones who have been raped, may be angry and not wanting to talk about their trauma?
I think that's really common. I think it's really common to take the lead from her. It's absolutely normal to be angry. It's common to be angry, to be furious, and to let those feelings to let those feelings play out. I still get angry. I'm getting ready to have another surgery. I'm mad about that. I don't want to have that. That's, it's these feelings are, this is righteous anger. Something evil happened to you. Something evil happened to her. It's absolutely right and natural that she should feel that way. I would also suggest help. I'm a big proponent of that because these things don't just go away. And that's, I think sometimes we think that if I'm doing something good with this, if I'm doing something positive, if I'm distracting myself, that everything will just go away, and it doesn't just go away. But I think letting her kind of lead the way as far as what she wants to talk about and what she doesn't, but also definitely getting her in with people who understand is hugely important, because when you talk with other people who've been through it, you don't have that gasp factor. When you share your story, you've got people, that's so horrible, and it's nice to be able to talk to other people who don't have that, so you can be completely filter-free and share.
Help is a good segue to the next question. Mm-hmm. How can pregnancy centers and pro-life civilians best walk alongside ministries like Love Louder?
I'm sorry, ask that again?
How can civilians and other pro-life pregnancy centers help ministries like Love Louder, yours?
Definitely referring people to us. It would be great if we could have more ministries like ours. For right now, we're the only ones out there doing what we do. So we have a hotline that's 24/7. We have a website. We have cards. We have magnets. We have flyers. Everything. We want to get the word out there, because so often women or people who work at PRCs don't have the tools or don't have the experience, and so they come upon someone who's been raped and is pregnant, and they don't really know what to do. And so that's where we step in. We're people who have dealt with sexual assault or are mothers from rape, and we can walk her through that. And so we'd love to partner with as many people as we possibly can. And we have affiliates who are, of organizations, adoption and post-abortive healing services. And so if we can't find the answer, if we can't help you, we know people who can.
Wonderful. This next one is a rough one. In your opinion, should we prosecute women who abort their babies?
In my opinion, no. I don't think that prosecution at this stage, if abortion were to become illegal today, I think eventually there would be a time. But right now, I think that we need to have a period of de-brainwashing, if that makes sense. I know all my life abortion has been legal. And I know we talked to a lot of pro-choice people who, I wasn't expecting this question, okay. All my life abortion has been legal. My mother was pro-choice until the day she died. She loved her grandson very, very much. I guess I'm thinking of really her and her friends when I think of people who are like, pro-choice people are just murderers and they just hate all children, and that's not the case. There really is a serious disconnect. There really is a serious scale over the eyes issue where people don't see the truth. And I think that there needs to be a time that we have a period where if it becomes illegal, where we have a period where women are offered help. I don't think it's fair to all of a sudden decide that we're going to criminalize or punish women who all their life it's been legal, and now we're telling them not only right now is it illegal, but you're going to go to jail too. I think there really needs to be. We're always going to have crisis pregnancies. There are always going to be women who are desperate. There are always going to be women who are scared. I think that's the demographic that we need to reach into with love, with support, with concern, and not prosecution.
This is a very interesting one. As a sidewalk advocate, what would you say in 20 seconds, the 20 seconds we have to interact with a woman who is a victim of rape entering an abortion clinic?
I don't do sidewalk advocacy, but in 20 seconds, I would let her know that she is not alone. I would let her know that in moments of high trauma, we don't make the best decisions. We don't make decisions that have eternal consequences, that have lifelong consequences. I would ask her to ask her if she'd be willing to talk with other women who have walked this path that she is about to walk. before she makes a decision that she's going to carry the rest of her life, I would be very, very careful not to make her feel, that's such a tough one, not to make her feel ganged up on, not to make her feel more frightened. She's at her most broken and vulnerable, and she's likely being told that this is how you're going to move on and this is how you're going to forget all of those things that I said. And I think it's very important that she knows that the rape is going to live with her forever. That's something that never goes away. But who she's angry at is the man who hurt her, and that is not the child, and that there is nothing wrong with loving the child, and that she doesn't have to walk through this alone. And that's something that we really have to say and mean. We get a lot of people who have come to us and they say, we had a lot of pro-lifers, say that when I was pregnant, I wasn't going to be alone, and then here I am pregnant from rape, and everyone, now these pro-life people are saying, we'll go to a church or something. And so when we step out there and say, we're going to be there for you and we're going to walk through this with you, we have to mean it. So, sorry, that wasn't a great answer. I'm not great on the spot.
No, it was. If you can keep her there long enough to hear all of that, that's a beautiful answer. Jennifer, how can mental health professionals or anyone in healthcare who is confronted with these situations best support victims? And this one is signed a therapist.
There are mental health professionals who specialize in PTSD and sexual assault trauma. I wouldn't just send someone I love or myself go to someone who doesn't have experience like this. It's not a catch-all thing. It's very, very, very specific. And there are a lot of specific therapies geared towards sexual trauma. And it's getting past that stigma. It's getting past the stigma of not only mental health, but sexual assault. And that's hugely, hugely important. Getting with the right person, with someone that they feel safe with, someone they feel comfortable with, and someone who has legitimate experience working with survivors.
Jennifer, this is a personal one about your experience. Mm-hmm. Did you or do you have any contact with the rapist's family?
I do not. And actually, okay, this is a whole, I swear this is not like a Lifetime movie thing, but there's a whole other aspect of this. He was Native American. So once my case was closed, meaning he was dead, my part of the case was closed, I don't know what happened after that, because the man who killed him was also Native American. All this was in the hands of tribal police. So I can't know, not being Native American, I can't know what happened from that point on. I can't know much about that. My son can find out one day, I cannot. We were advised to not run DNA through like a 23andMe or one of those kind of things, because tribes flag them, and then there could be a custody battle between that tribe and us. So one day, should my son want to find out about that tribe, I think that's great. We would absolutely encourage that. But right now, while he is a minor, we could really do without a custody battle with strangers.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I love this card, and I love this question. And I'm calling to mind what you said toward the end of the presentation. Your child didn't save you, God saved you.
Right.
And it leads to this question. Jesus often comes to a person in distress in mystical ways, like an apparition or a voice. Have you experienced anything like this? And P.S., you're beautiful.
So the housekeeper who found me on the stairs at the hotel, we never found her again. She found me in the snow. This was, my brain swelled because there was a bleed, right? If I was left longer than I was, I would have had serious brain damage. If I wasn't left as long as I was, I would have had serious brain damage. I was being carried away because the other victims were killed apart from the place where they were raped. He was interrupted by this housekeeper who apparently was not supposed to be there. No one, ma'am, there was one custodian on, everyone called in, there was one housekeeper a man that day. There was no woman working. I thought, okay, well, she's illegal. They don't want to get her in trouble, whatever. Please, I just want to talk to her. Can I just have her name? I just want to thank her. Ma'am, there was no one on staff that day. I saw her. She put her coat on me. I saw her. She cried with me. She held my hand until the police got there, until the ambulance got there. I know she was there. I personally think she was an angel, because she saved my life. Yeah.
I think I'm going to end the question and answer period with that. That
Okay.
was beautiful. Can we rise one more time, please?
Thank you all so much.